Hi, I'm Baker Betty. I'm a baking educator and I'm getting ready to start a sourdough starter club here on TikTok where I walk you day by day through the process of starting a sourdough starter from scratch, and I invite you to join me and do it with me. Here are the details if you'd like to join. I will be posting day 1 week from today, which is Tuesday, October 3rd. You can start with me on day 1 or you can start anytime after that. You're going to want to start your day 1 on a day when you have about 2 weeks following that day that you can tend to your starter for just about 5 minutes around the same time each day. Now, after we get through that first 2-week time period, you're not going to need to tend to it every single day, but we do need about 2 weeks to get it really nicely established. And you're going to want to do this around the same time each day. It doesn't need to be exact. It can be within a few hours, but ideally around a similar time each day. I live in Chicago, which is Central Time Zone, so I will be posting the videos each day around 8 a.m. Central Time. So if this doesn't work with your schedule to see what you're going to do that day, if you need to do it earlier in the day, you'll probably want to start your day 1 on day 2 or sometime later. I'm making a playlist for all of these videos so you can easily find them and go in order no matter what day you start on. If you don't know how to use playlists on TikTok, there is a little button here right at the bottom of the video that you can click on. It will pull up the whole playlist of videos and you can go through them sequentially. Here are the ingredients that you are going to need to get your starter started. Very few ingredients. 1, water. If the water is good enough for you to drink, you can probably use it to make your starter. If you think your water has a lot of chlorine in it, you may want to use filtered water. I use the filter on my refrigerator to feed my starter. You could use a Brita filter or you could use bottled water. But as long as it's good enough for you to drink, it should work well for your starter. Number 2 is flour. I like to use whole wheat flour to get my starter going. It is what I recommend you using because it is going to give you the best chance at success in getting it going quickly. Now, you can use rye flour as well. A lot of people do use rye flour, but it's a little pricier and typically you need to order it online. So I always use whole wheat flour to get started because it's more accessible for people. It is what I recommend you using. For week 2, we are going to incorporate in some white flour. It can be all-purpose unbleached flour or unbleached bread flour. Make sure it's unbleached. Again, we will only need about a half a pound of this or 250 grams or a little more than 2 cups. So total amount of flour, about a pound, half pound each of whole grain flour, either whole wheat or rye flour, and then half pound of a unbleached white flour. I have already had some people ask me if they can do gluten-free flour. Unfortunately, gluten-free sourdough is a different ball game. Other types of grains ferment a lot faster. You need to kind of follow a bit of a different process than what we will be following here. And truthfully, I'm not really an expert on gluten-free sourdough. So I would refer you to the baker, Bakerita, and she has a whole tutorial on making a gluten-free sourdough starter and making gluten-free bread. If you have whole wheat flour that has been sitting in the back of your pantry for 6 months plus, get some fresh flour. Whole wheat flour can go rancid and it can make your starter start molding over. All flour can go rancid, but whole wheat flour goes rancid faster. That is it for ingredients on getting our starter going. Now let's talk about equipment. You're going to need something to put the starter in. Ideally something glass so that you can see through it. But glass or ceramic is going to be fine, especially when you're first getting it going. Even just a bowl is fine. I like to use these little 8-ounce Pyrex container when I'm first getting it started. We're going to keep the starter very, very small as we are getting it established so that we don't have a lot of waste. I typically will then, once we're nicely established, move it into one of these larger jars. This is a 16-ounce wide mouth ball jar that works really well. Or this is like a 12-ounce jar, which is plenty big unless you're going to do really large batch baking. You also need something to stir it up with. I like these little teeny tiny spatulas to get down in here into my small container, or just a regular little silicone spatula is also fine. Here's where I start losing people, but I'm gonna beg you to stay with me here, okay? I am going to very, very much encourage you to get a digital scale. It doesn't need to be fancy. You can find one for less than $15 on Amazon. Honestly, you can probably find one for less than $10 on Amazon, but some kind of simple digital scale. And I do want to say this, sourdough starter is not fussy at all. It is a very flexible process. It's a very easy process. It doesn't even need to be very exact. But you're going to see as we go through the process why measuring in grams is really going to start making much more sense in your brain. I don't want to get into all the nitty gritty here, but it's going to, in the long run, make things much easier for you. So I'm going to highly encourage you to grab a scale. Now I will give you volume measurements because I want you to do this with me, okay? And I don't want that to be the reason why you're not doing it with me, but I do think that you're gonna find this a lot easier if you do grab a scale. Really good to also have a little notebook that you can take notes in. My approach to sourdough is to not just tell you what to do, but to tell you why we are doing it. My approach is by no means the right way or the only way to do it. Everybody kind of has a different approach. And so my goal here is to help you understand why we are doing things the way we're doing it and why somebody else might be doing something a little bit different. So you can kind of make those decisions for yourself on what works best for you. That's it. That's all we need to get started, okay? Water, flour, something to put it in, something to mix it with, and something to measure it with. If you're not gonna get a scale, you do need some measuring spoons and measuring cups, but again, I'm gonna really encourage you to grab a scale. As we get going through this process and we get closer to being able to bake a loaf of bread, I will talk to you about a couple other pieces of equipment that you're probably going to want to have. You probably already have things that will work for this. You don't need anything fancy. There's really not a lot of fancy equipment that you need to bake a good loaf of sourdough bread. Now there are fancier things that you might want to have if you really get into this, but again, I'll tell you what you really need to have and then what are some things that you might be nice to have. Later this week, I will post kind of an intro to sourdough starter video where I just talk about what sourdough starter is, what sourdough bread is, to kind of give you a good groundwork going into understanding what we're even trying to accomplish here. Really excited to get going with you all. I've done this quite a few times with different groups of people, and I think it's just so fun for all of us to get our starters going together. They kind of feel like starter siblings. So I really hope you join us. Bye.